With us is Jamie Smith. He is the publisher of Cincinnati Business Courier, and we're just kind of getting the crystal ball out and looking at just what the business temperature is right now and what's going to happen in the future. Jamie, I think that if nothing else, before we look in the future, let's look at this last month. And I think that even though we knew that there was a threat to coronavirus and we had heard about the outbreak in Seattle and the coast and things like that, I'm not sure that I've ever seen something turn nationally since 9/11 that it did with this whole outbreak. I mean, you were on your way to the SEC tournament. Everybody thought that, well, at least we're going to get some basketball in. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't like basketball with no fans. It was no basketball, period.
Absolutely. I remember I had just passed through Louisville on my way to Nashville, or at least on my way to Bowling Green, when someone sent me a text, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "What are you sorry for?" They're like, "NCAA just decided they're not going to have spectators." And of course, at that point, it was just the big dance was saying that. And at that point, there were still games going on for the SEC tournament. But I made it to Bowling Green that night with the intention the next day driving the rest of the way to Nashville. And of course, at the end of, or about midway through the games that night, we learned there would be no tournament. So it's, definitely I agree with you. I don't think anybody thought it was going to get to the point. We have a sister publication in Seattle, and we have one in Portland. And of course, they were both working from home about 2 weeks before we started. We started like March 14th, I think, here in Cincinnati. So they had been doing it for 2 weeks. And I remember thinking, wow, I wonder what that's like for them. I can't imagine that. Little did I know that I could imagine it in 2 short weeks, what that would be like.
And I kept thinking, okay, kind of that 2 week window, just like you said, give it 2 weeks, it'll all calm down, everything will be fine. I mean, I was convinced that it was going to be like this 2 week thing. And, obviously here we are 2 weeks and quite a bit after that. So we're starting to hear rumblings now about when we're going to get back. We were talking about that last week, about coming back, opening the city, opening the country. Now we're starting to hear rumblings. Usually when there's smoke, there's fire. I think that maybe this is a turning point. And I hate to say that because there are still so many people ill and so many people dying. But at least in the American psyche, it may be a turning point that we are looking ahead. We're looking and we're seeing that light at the end of the tunnel. What have you heard from some of the business leaders?
I've spent the biggest part of this week already on probably 10 Zoom calls and also conference calls. And today alone, I talked to 3 CEOs, and in every one of those conversations, one of them would let something out, a couple weeks when we're back to a normal. And then, of course, they say, well, whatever the new normal is.
Right.
All kind of thought that same way. Within a couple weeks, we'll at least be back in our offices. We'll at least be opening our doors up to customers. I think there's still that mixed message out there, from the federal and then the state government. And I think, our state government, on both sides of the river here, have really proven to be leaders. So it may take us a little longer here in Cincinnati than it does in some of the other markets to get back to that normal, to get back to our business as usual.
Right. And you're right. What is the new normal? Will I feel comfortable going to a crowded sporting event? Will I feel comfortable sitting shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow with people in a restaurant that I don't know? How do you think the businesses are going to have to make that shift? Because they have to make people feel comfortable,
right? Or
I'm not going to go into that restaurant, or I'm not going to go to that sporting event. So what do you think that businesses are going to have to do to, they're just not going to open their doors. They're going to open their doors, but they're going to have to make me feel comfortable going in those doors.
Well, a big portion of our business, probably, close to a third of our business in the event business, Betsy. We have a lot of big events, and we're already talking about, people probably aren't going to be comfortable going back in to a crowded banquet room, setting tables, sharing dinner. So we're already talking about some of these programs that we have in the second half. Once we get them launched again, do we move them to a different kind of format? Do we look at some of our awards programs that we have and not necessarily have the big gala or the big awards program, but only invite the honorees? We're talking to a lot of our sponsors and saying, okay, if we want to move on with this, in light of what we have out there, in light of how people are going to react, because we don't know how people are going to react, but what about if we tried this approach? We corporate-wide canceled, or I shouldn't say canceled, postponed all of our events through May 15th. And last Friday, we moved that even on to July the 6th. So that we have, and when I say event, that could be as many as 10 people, we postponed. So right now, that's through the 4th of July holidays, we won't be having any. And I think us, like everybody else in town that have been postponing, now we have to figure out, we've got to reschedule the ones that are going to be rescheduled. That's going to be a task in itself, because the whole city is going to be rescheduling 3 months worth of missed activity.
Yes, the second half of this year, I think, is going to be busy for everybody, just trying to catch up.
We may be doing chicken dinners every night together, Betsy.
That's okay. That's all right. I don't mind that. But I think that the one thing that surprised me, after you got over the shock that I can't go anywhere, I can't go to the office, I can't go out to eat. Once I got over the shock of that, I was really amazed at how good people were in adhering to all that. I mean, it's a little spooky to drive downtown and there's no cars downtown. There is no one walking around Fountain Square. But, restaurants have evolved. They've done the carry-out part. They're really trying to keep at least the kitchen staff going. But I have to say that I was really pleasantly surprised at how we, as a city, as a community, really came together and started adhering to this new normal that we have now.
Right. Especially the introverts of us that are. Yeah, I would agree with you. That's amazed me. And, the other thing, and it shouldn't have amazed me, but it has, is how much Cincinnati has come together. When you look at the business community, you look at the restaurant scene, you look at organizations like 3CDC, you look at all these things that they've pulled together to try to not only help themselves out, but help others out. And, you look at companies like Courier. I mean, Courier has just done a phenomenal job, I think, of trying to keep people, obviously keep the goods and stuff that they need there, but to try to really look out and set a roadmap for our region. And I think that makes me proud to be a Cincinnati business leader when I see that.
Absolutely, because I think that this recovery is going to start with the community. I think it's going to come from the community up. They have said many, many times, it's not going to be a light switch. We're not going to open all the doors and everything will be back to the way it was on March the 1st. I think it has to come from the individual communities, the communities that will rally around the neighborhood bar, the neighborhood restaurant. You go back there and you start supporting these people. So let us look ahead and dig out that crystal ball that I know you've got in that drawer somewhere. And how do you see this recovery happening? Where do you think that it will come from? Will it come from that restaurant opening, or will it come from, Kroger going back to 24 hours, or will it come from not having that restriction on X number of people in a particular space? Where do you see it really turning so that we do feel comfortable getting back out there?
I think it's going to be a combined effort, but I think the biggest part of it is, and I think we're going to have to accept that the fact that some of it may not go back to the way it was ever. And that could be, in our business, you think about all the times we get together in big groups, that may never happen again. You may not, I don't know. Being a big sports fan, I hate to even think that, but some of that may not happen for a while. I think normal activity, I think people going back to the stores, going back to the restaurants, I think that's going to happen as soon as the governors and anybody else says we can go back, I think people will start to go back. I don't think we'll see the crowd, but to be honest, I don't think it will take long, because I think people are starving right now at interaction. And I think why people have appreciated slowing their life down a little bit and not having as much on your calendar, I think at the same time, people are missing that interaction that they have on a regular basis. I've talked to several of the bankers, and I think that's the biggest differentiator right now is in all the past economic downturns that we've had, the banks have been in, it's been more of a financial crisis, right? So they weren't there to help. You're seeing all these, the PPP loan, the EIDL loan, all this SBA activity. They're there to help right now. I think there's still a lot to be worked out for specific industries like the restaurant industry. I don't think they're quite prepared yet to help what they need. And I'm hoping that they can get around that, because that I think is a critical piece. Because if you think about restaurants, I think I heard Brittany Ruby share the fact that they're a little bit over 50% of the food supply. So a piece, that critical piece doesn't get back to where it is, that could, I think, cause a big problem. And I think, I hope those, the powers that be in Columbus and in DC, I hope they realize that and help that aspect get back to normal. Because I think that's a critical piece in all that we do, given the way our society is.
Right, and I think that it's a wake-up call for a lot of companies and the way they do business, the way they have treated their employees. I think it says a lot about the leadership in some of these companies. Like you mentioned, Brittany Ruby, even though they had to lay off so many of their employees, they're still paying their health benefits. So I think that, we learn a lot about these companies through tough times like this. But I thought it was really telling. This week, I got a email from Ticketmaster, and it was a survey. And the survey basically is, what will you feel comfortable in a setting again, in an event, in a concert? What will make you feel comfortable? So I think that that's really telling that they're starting to take the temperature of what people will do, what fans will do, what concert goers will do, and what they will accept. Will you accept that big mosh pit at the bottom? Probably not. So one final question, Jamie, when we get to go out and do whatever we want to, what's the first thing you're going to do?
Oh, the first thing I'm going to do is go have probably a nice drink with many of my friends together in the same room. There's just something not quite there when you're toasting them via Skype or via Zoom, right? I want to be rubbed shoulder to shoulder with them, being able to see their actions and their interactions with me.
That's true. Well, hopefully that will be sooner rather than later. Jamie Smith from the Business Courier. Thank you so much. Take care. Stay well.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.